Dr. Mike, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thanks for having me.
What kinds of accommodations tend to be helpful for 2E kids?
That really depends on the child. As everyone has always said, you meet one 2E child, you meet one 2E child, right? They're all so different. They present so differently. They have different needs, different expectations, things like that. But in terms of what the philosophy has to be, is sometimes even the littlest things can make a difference. We don't have to go in there and overhaul the entire system, right? We may have to eventually, but for right now, what are some of the little things that can help my child, you know, do better within that environment?
Little things make a big difference, right? Sometimes, or they can make a big difference.
You can.
And they don't always, right? So at what point is it time to consider the possibility that maybe accommodations aren't going to be enough? Maybe this particular learning environment or approach is just not going to work for your kid, and it's time to consider alternatives.
Yeah. You can tell by your child's behavior if things are working or not. Even subtle changes in behavior should be indicators of something else that might be going on, right? Signs of anxiety, for instance, signs of maybe even a little bit of school refusal, little stomach ache in the morning. Oh, I got a headache. I really don't want to go today. And that could be a lot of things. It could be just, peer relationships. It can be, something to do with school, something to do with school work. It can be anything. But the idea is you're looking at subtle changes in behavior because it's different from what you normally see. And then when you start seeing that, you have to dig into the root causes of those issues. And if all the accommodations are in place, everything's been done, and again, everything looks on the outside like it's going to work, and it's still not working, then it's time to start looking elsewhere. Maybe it's the environment. Maybe it's the relationship with the teacher. Maybe it's the pedagogy. Maybe it's the approach. Maybe it's the curriculum. Maybe it's the peers. Okay. But any of those things, if they're off and a child starts to feel anxious or unsafe, they're not growing. They're not learning. They're cognitively a little bit more stagnant. So looking at those subtle changes is big, and paying attention and then doing something about it. What's going on with my child? What are you seeing at school? What are we seeing at home? Okay. What are the patterns of behavior? And then look at productivity. There's the thing, you have to measure growth. You have to be able to measure growth academically against standards. And you also have to measure emotional growth as well, and social growth. You have to see that the kids are progressing. Okay. So if I'm seeing stagnant growth in any of those areas, I need to start questioning why. Okay, the MAP scores came in from spring and then fall and then spring, and I'm not seeing any growth in language arts here. What's going on there? Well, a lot of times our kids start beyond the standard, so it's hard for them to grow. But that doesn't mean they can't be taught, right? So that's not an excuse. So when you're seeing those patterns, lack of growth, behavioral changes, signs of anxiety, stress, then it's time to go a little bit deeper and figure out the source. And if the source cannot be fixed, if it cannot be amended, in essence, it's time to look at a different environment. And for twice exceptional children, for gifted kids, environment is everything, right? There may be a point where they're in a classroom where they just don't have any intellectual peers, right? They're standing out, they're alone, they're isolated, they're not learning, right? They're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting to be able to learn. That's not the right environment. So if they can't move classes or put in a cluster group with some other kids that are a little bit more like them, or in essence, have an alternative curriculum, right? Maybe some grade acceleration, or not grade acceleration, more subject acceleration, adding depth, breadth, whatever they need. If that can't be done, then you got to look elsewhere. And for us personally, literally, it was more than that. For our daughter, it was her sensory processing. She couldn't handle the crowds, the lights, all the stuff going on in school, right? She would shut down daily. So when we started seeing that, we had to pull her up. So again, it can be different for every child. Rashawn was very different. They weren't following his IEP. I told him, I said, what you're doing is against the law. But even the leadership wouldn't support it. So I said, well, all right, see ya. We'll find a different way to do it. So again, lots of subtle clues, but when your child is not happy in going to school, right? They don't feel safe, or even maybe looking forward to, even if it's just because I have friends there, right? There's got to be something there that, that motivates them to learn, that motivates them to go. If that's missing and it's missing for a period of time, you better start looking.